Alright, hi guys, welcome back. We only have a few more videos to do. You guys have been doing awesome, so let's go ahead and dive in. We are going to do a little quick mini unit on circles. So I just want to go over some pieces of information about circles that we should hopefully already know. Their circumference is the distance around a circle, okay? So that's from here to here. If I go all the way around, if I have like a tape measure that can bend and I measure the distance, that's the circumference. It's a distance, so it's measured in like inches, meters, centimeters, whatever it is. Your formula to find that is 2 times pi times r. And you guys had a lot of experience with pi in our volume unit. So the diameter is the distance from one endpoint to the other that goes through the center, not just any point from one end to the other. It's got to be like completely half the distance of the circle. The radius is half of the diameter, so it's any point from the center of, that's an eraser, from the center of the circle to any endpoint. So like if you think about it like a wagon wheel, all of the different spokes are a bunch of different radii. And the new thing that we're going to add on today, information about circles, is what an arc is. And an arc is just a partial segment of the circumference. So what that means is if I have got a circle, my arc is just this distance to this distance. Okay? So the measure of that arc is measured in degrees, and it's the same thing as this angle right here. So if this angle is 42 degrees, then the measure of this arc is also 42 degrees. They're the exact same. So let's go ahead and dive into our problem, and we can talk a little bit more about those. So it says the radius of this little bullseye here means circle R. Okay, so the reason we put the dot in it is so that we don't accidentally confuse it and think that it's an O or a 0. So that's circle R. The radius is 10. So that means all of these distances right here are all distance 10. This right here means the measure of arc, the little arc above symbol means the word arc of WZ. So the measure of arc WZ is 52, and the measure of arc XWZ is 212. So that means that those angles are the same thing. So if this measure of arc WZ is 52, that means that this angle right here is also 52 degrees. And so we know that all of the angles in a circle add up to 360. We know that all arc measures add to 360 degrees. So it tells us that WZ is 52. It tells us that XWZ, this bigger distance, is 212. And it asks for the length of just the part from W to X. So length is different than measure. The measure is the one in degrees. To find the length, of an arc is actually a really easy process. You're going to do the measure of the arc divided by 360 and then just multiply it by the circumference. And that's it. The only two things that you need for the formula are the measure and the radius. So the one thing we have to do before we can just plug stuff in is we have to make sure that we have the right measure. So remember, think about this like we did with segment addition or angle addition. I always use like the road trip metaphor. If the whole road trip from Z, that's a bad line. The whole trip from Z to X is 212 miles, but the first night you drove from Z to W, and that was 52 miles, how many miles do you have left on the road trip? Okay, that's what I want to know, is that distance from W to X. So the whole distance from Z to X is 210 or 212. You already did 52 miles on your circular road trip, so how many miles would you have left? To find that measure of WX, you would do the total minus the piece you've already done. And you'll get that the rest of the trip is 160. So that means that this arc right here is 160. Now, some other things you might be asked to do, wink, wink, on your target potentially, will be to find a measure if you're given everything else. So if you're given, let me clean this up a little bit. Let's say you're given everything except one. So you're given this arc length, and this arc length, and they ask you to find the missing one. You just need to remember that they all need to add up to 360. So this plus this plus this plus this all has to add up to 360. So that's how you're going to find that missing value, wink, wink, on a target. And then also remember, if they give you the angle, like if they tell you that this angle is 50, then this arc is also 50. Again, wink, wink, nudge, nudge for your target. So we have our measure. We already have our radius because it was in the problem. So now we just plug this in. So I've got 160 over 360 times 2 times pi times r. And hopefully this should make some sense, because this fraction right here is just showing you like basically what percentage of the circle do you have. 160 degrees out of the 360 degrees, you say like, oh, okay, that's, about a third, 2/3 of the circle. So the length should be 2/3 or 1/3, whatever it is, of the circumference. And that's what we're doing. So the good news is that we're going to simplify it, and we are going to leave the pi out of it, because when you put the pi in, then you get a really long decimal and we have to round. So all we have to do, oops, I forgot to plug in my radius, is just multiply the plain numbers. So this, and this. That's all we're going to multiply. And I'll show you how to do it on the Calculate 84 app. I recommend downloading that. If you've just got a regular iPhone, I can show you that too. So Calculate 84. We've got alpha y equals enter. I'm going to do 160 over 360, and then times, not minus, times 2 times 10. And that's it. We're just going to leave the pi out. And we see that we get it as decimal. We don't want decimals. That's the whole reason we're keeping the pi out, is to avoid it. So go to math on the left side, and it's already highlighted on fraction, and hit enter. And that's the fraction that I'm looking for. You could also multiply it all in the numerator and then just simplify it. But either way, that's my final answer. And so I would say, oops, that's a highlighter. I would say 80 over 9 pi is my answer. Those of you that are going to type this on a target, you would type that in and you would do a parenthesis, 80, the slash, 9, and then you would write the word pi, okay? Because we don't have a pi symbol on our keyboards. So again, if that was your answer and you were putting it in on the target, parenthesis, numerator, slash, denominator, parenthesis, and then the letters for pi. Capital or lowercase is fine. If you have an iPhone calculator, right here, I would, trying to clear, I would do the 160 times, oops, not divide. I would just multiply the numerator first, okay? So I would do the 160 times 2 times 10, and that's going to give you 3,200, and then you would divide that by, where's the divide? You would divide that by the 360 denominator, and then you'd get that same decimal, and then you unfortunately can't like click to reduce that when you just have the iPhone calculator, but you can simplify your fraction. So if you did it on an iPhone calculator and you had 3,200 over 360, you could just reduce that fraction. So they both have 2 in common, they both have 10 in common, and then reduce it until you've got your simplest fraction. But yeah, so that is number 1. At the end of the day, it was a lot of vocab, but it was really just 2 steps. Find the measure, either by subtracting given ones or knowing that the whole thing adds to 360, and then the radius is usually given to you, and then just throw it in the formula. M divided by 30 or 360 times circumference, 2 pi r. Leave the pi out. If you have any questions, email me, remind, text me, anything you want, Google Classroom. I'm here for you guys. I love you guys so much. Trying to keep these short and sweet. Love you. Bye.